India and disaster management. Objectives. After attending this lesson, the user should be able to understand the relation between hazard and disaster, the extent to which the intertwining role of various concepts, the type of disasters and relation of the disaster to physiography of India. The lesson also highlights the participation of common men in the mitigation, spreading the awareness, the necessity of disaster management, and the purpose of evolving a policy at national level. Introduction. Disasters are never-ending catastrophes on the planet Earth. No country is relieved of this menace, though the intensity in the vulnerability varies. The burden to each and every government's exchequer has brought the attention of the rulers and administrators. The present statistics point out that the worst hit of disasters are the developing countries. In many of these countries, 95% of deaths are recorded to be due to natural disasters. The countries with lower income suffer in restraining the damages. This is mainly due to lack of infrastructure, house building with poor quality, and the loose ends existing in the governing structure. The present trend claims that disaster preparedness, relief, and rehabilitation efforts are found to be of no credential. Because of such opinions, it is a must that such countries should focus on the preparedness to reduce the impacts of disasters and to provide timely rescue, relief, and recovery, just to avoid the status of minor disaster to become disastrous. Culture and knowledge. India is unique in many respects when compared to other countries in the world by being the only country which adopts Hinduism, which is encouraging joint family system. Once the modernization enters into our culture, the joint family system is gradually vanishing. Similarly, as the knowledge grows, the unitary subjects got developed, enabling the advancement of science and technology rather to the core of micronization. At that stage, another cycle of reversal appeared. Now, knowledge is getting strengthened only by means of combination with other subjects. On the other hand, knowledge breakthrough has successfully progressed to overtake the tradition by means of multidiscipline. So, knowledge of multidisciplines is needed in India, which is deep-rooted in the Indian civilization. Any government policy must take into account the intertwining issues of culture and civilization. Initiatives for controlling disaster management. Though India has met with many devastating disasters in the past, the foolproof scientific recording was not seriously thought of. Only in the year 1947, the tsunami hit in Bombay coast, introduced by Makran Flecksha, has been recorded, but has not been pursued further, in spite of being exposed to many warnings to the managers comprised of defense officials. If we would have continued the practice of strengthening the public awareness, we would not have lost thousands of lives. The quake in Bhuj was the first occasion in which the geoscientists were given freedom to record the feelings. The first earthquake which has seeded the alternative thinking in the minds of geoscientists and the government to look into the causes for such disasters. It was for centuries believed that the Deccan Plateau or peninsular India may not get trapped to be a victim to such disaster. By the time the effect of rehabilitation is felt, another one at Bhuj, Gujarat has joined. By now, the weakness of both tectonism and anthropogenic activities have been focused ahead. Physiography of India and disaster. India is a subcontinent with wider landscapes and manifested with numbers of major hills and rivers, plateau and dense forest. The geological and clones geographical formations in India are so weak and non-resistive to disasters. By area, India is susceptible to all types of physiographic forms. It is the sixth largest country in the world with a share of 135.79 million square kilometers, 2.4% of the world's surface area, whereas the population in India within this small area goes to 16.4%. In the north and northeast parts are the youngest mountain chain. Himalaya is highly susceptible to earthquake, landslides and avalanches. Indo-Gangetic Plain is prone to floods as well as drought. Northwestern part is prone to drought and desertification, while coastal regions are prone to tsunamis and cyclones. In other words, the country is susceptible to all types of disasters, that is, earthquakes, droughts, flood, cyclones, tsunamis, landslides, avalanches, desertification, forest fires, and industrial and vehicle accidents, road, rail, air. In the world, 90% disasters occur in developing countries. In India, 70% area is drought-prone, 60% earthquake-prone, 12% flood-prone, and 8% cyclone-prone. These percentage figures show that there is need of trained manpower that can assist at the time of disaster as well as in planning of schemes, monitoring and management of disasters. In the present context of changing technological scenario, there is urgent need of trained manpower for the oil industry as well as government innovative organizations. As we have the Himalayan plate of world surface, 4% as an overriding plate boundary, and the subsiding plate boundary of Malaysian Peninsulae, we have to face frequently the natural disasters. The devastative type of disasters are basically accounted to be of two types, namely natural and anthropogenic. Natural disasters are those occurring beyond the control of human beings and virtually not predictable, whereas the anthropogenic disasters are of those taking place due to human interventions and activities like road, rail, air, and industrial accidents. Instead of going into the details of background, let us go into the study of disasters. Definition of disasters. Usually, the term disaster is referred to overwhelming events and circumstances that test the capacity to respond by the community or individual beyond their ability, leading to massive disruption of the individual or the community to perform or discharge its function. Different scholars have defined the disasters are associated with the concept of crisis. The unique features of both these phenomena are rapid time consequences, disruption of normal coping abilities, perception of threat and helplessness, significant change in behavior, and looking forward to help from others. There are many classifications and categories of disasters attempted by scholars such as natural and man-made disasters, causing destruction to life and property from different causes, natural disasters such as volcano eruptions, earthquakes, tsunamis, typhoons, tornadoes are overwhelming physical forces leading to grave threat and loss to human beings. Kinds of disasters. The disasters are of different categories. They are categorized based on the extent to which a community's structure, services, or geographic area is likely to be damaged by the impact of particular hazard. Disasters are categorized into three kinds as neither anticipated nor expected, anticipated but not expected, anticipated and also expected. No government is interested to see their citizen to face their deprived situation out of such disasters. the disaster with severe damages, mitigation has to be started. Disaster monitoring follows with mitigation. There are three important elements such as preparedness, prevention, and mitigation. Prevention cannot be maintained as long as natural disasters concerned, whereas one can make the people's confidence by way of preparedness. Under the preparedness, the society has to be alerted with sufficient knowledge on the kinds of damages and the means of protecting them during the course of facing any unexpected disasters. After the disasters, the recovery, resetting of the people, completion of the warranted re-engineering, it also needs sufficient coordination from the society. Of all, to keep a person knowledgeable on the events to take place is the most important action. At the same time, the Center for Research on the Epidemiology of Disasters, CRED, defines the disasters in another form. CRED defines a disaster as a situation or event which overwhelms local capacity, necessitating a request to a national or international level for external assistance, an unforeseen and often sudden event that causes great damage, destruction, and human suffering. Disasters are the convergence of hazards with vulnerabilities. As such, an increase in physical, social, economic, or environmental vulnerability can mean an increase in the frequency of disasters. The complete EMDAT divides disasters into two categories as natural and technological. It further divides the natural disaster category into 5 subcategories, which in turn cover 12 numbers of disasters. Vulnerability and disaster risk. The United Nations and WHO define a disaster as a serious disruption of the functioning of a community or a society, causing widespread human, material, economic, or environmental losses, which exceed the ability of the affected community or society to cope using its own resource. Thus, the disaster consists of the interaction between the hazard and the vulnerability of those affected, not the mere fact of the hazard's occurrence. For any given hazard, disaster risk varies according to a population's vulnerability. Example, age, gender, health status, SES. The natural disaster categories, types, and subtypes are elaborately explained in several texts in literature. Vulnerability theory. To explain vulnerability from a theoretical framework, scholars have attempted to provide many models. One of the models which is more convincing to explain all types of victimization, which includes the preventive strategies to avoid victimization and coping methods to adapt oneself after the victimization, is the psychosocial coping model of Dusic, 1985-2006. The psychosocial that every human being possesses required to cope oneself within a given milieu. The individuals who do not possess resources to an adequate level to meet the demands of a particular type, magnitude, gravity, and level of stress make them vulnerable. The personal resources of an individual could comprise of physical and social certain other resources which are inherent, cannot be changed. Among the resources which make a person vulnerable, modifications could be done on some of them which will make the person resilient. Such modifications to create resilience to a person could be teaching life skills to handle human relations in a better way, increasing and strengthening the circle of friends and other useful social contacts, enhancing the level of health parameters, planning things well in advance, and succeed in the tasks undertaken, learning unique skills to meet the special challenges in one's life. The crux of this psychosocial theory is the ability and conscious efforts of the individual to assess the strengths and weaknesses of an individual and a community, and then manipulate the resources to alter and strengthen it to overcome the vulnerabilities and ultimately to prevent or reduce the risks of victimization. Therefore, vulnerability assessment plays a very important role in the prevention and mitigation of any kind, including disasters. Study on disasters. The study of psychosocial aspects of disasters are of great use for a variety of reasons. To learn about the different types of disasters and as to how people respond to them. The study of counter-disaster activities such as prediction, directing and supervising disaster management, rescue and recovery operations, developing guidelines for long-term adaptation. To study the stressors, because even a single stressor or a disaster has impact on a mass of people at different levels. To study the range of psychosocial problems following a disaster, which could be used to design prevention and treatment programs, and to apply the knowledge gained from disasters to manage day-to-day happenings of smaller magnitudes of disasters. Resilience. The term resilience has been studied and defined by many scholars differently. Basically, resilience implies an ability to overcome or avoid or adapt to difficult situations or circumstances. Under the field of clinical psychology, the largely accepted definition of resilience is the ability of an individual to bounce back after an exposure to a very severe stress. Many others use the term resilience in different contexts, such as physical, ecological, social, and community contexts. Though resilience is a positive and interesting concept, it is important to understand the full meaning of the term and find answers to some questions, such as how it can be achieved, whether resilience could be built before and after a disaster, who would build resilience, and whether it is possible to build resilience from a psychological and community perspective, etc. These questions are approached by different disciplines from their own perspectives. The focus of engineering sciences is on the resilience of the physical environment. An ecological systems approach tries to understand resilience from interactions between important systems, example, people and the environment. The public health perspective examines resilience on the basis of the physical and mental well-being of individuals. Researchers working on the field of disasters attempt to create disaster-resilient societies. Even under severe adverse conditions, the reactions of people to disasters and to the trauma caused by it are not similar, as some get paralyzed while some others face it courageously and overcome it. Why is such difference in the individuals? According to their 5-part model to explain the resilience, Turt, Landay and Becker, Julia and Stephens, Christine, 2009, are of the view that resilience is a multi-dimensional concept made up of personal, social, and physical resources. The concept of psychological resilience under the 5-part model includes certain internal and external factors. The internal factors include cognitions, behaviors, emotion, and societal support. Resilience, as an integrated model, emphasizes the role of cognitions, emotions, behaviors, and physical activities. The integrations between these aspects fits into the environment section of the model. But this model has a great potential to build individual and community resilience, particularly before the adverse events happen, though needs further evaluation. Resilience and regeneration after disaster. We have witnessed that even after horrendous experiences of disasters, people continue to function as capable human beings, though the painful memories may last for a longer period. But despite these painful memories and emotional scares, they may also gain much new strength by facing the challenges bravely. Experiences of many people who have gone up to the door of death make them introspect as to how they have overcome that grave situation. To get their ability to meet the challenges, interpersonal relationships within family, significant life goals, etc., may occupy an important role. Hiroshima, subjected to one of the severest disasters in the world. It stands as a symbol against the severest use of nuclear weapons forever. It never happened anywhere in the world. Likewise, the Jewish communities who have faced the worst disaster of Holocaust have regenerated in Israel and many other countries with courage and resilience. The study of Rajkumar on the victims of Asian tsunami of December 2006 in Nagapattinam has proved psychological reactions to natural disasters. These are incidences diverse and created by different ethno-cultural factors. Most important finding of their study is that coping mechanisms prevail at the individual and community level, which enhance resilience in the wake of disasters and facilitate normal functioning in the victimized community without any professional interventions. Retrofitting infrastructure. Experts say that the buildings like hospitals and schools need to be retrofitted, referring to 2005 Pakistan quake, where 17,000 children were killed when school roofs and walls collapsed. Few of South Asia's metros have open spaces, leaving people nowhere to seek refuge if buildings collapse. And in some cities, tower blocks have been built on floodplains of rivers, which would cave in if a major tremor hit. In many countries like Bhutan and Nepal, infrastructure to remote areas is a challenge, as seen with the recent earthquake in India, where resources have for days been struggling to get to isolated villages, cut off by landslides blocking roads. Decrepit fire engines. The region's fire and ambulance services, considered to be at the front line of disaster response, are alarmingly unequipped and untrained for search and rescue operations and medical care. Let us take the case of Nepal. An 8-magnitude quake in the hotspot Kathmandu Valley would kill at least 40,000 people, injure 90,000, destroy almost 60% of the buildings, and leave almost 1 million people homeless. Yet, there are only 8 fire engines, most of which are more than 30 years old, to serve the population of 4 million people living in and around the Nepali capital. There has been some progress, and different countries are at different levels of preparedness to cope up with such incidences. But overall, it has been slow. Preparedness. Disaster preparedness involves forecasting and taking precautionary measures prior to an imminent threat when advance warnings are possible. Preparedness planning improves the response to the effects of a disaster by organizing the delivery of timely and effective rescue, relief, and assistance. Preparedness involves the development and regular testing of warning systems linked to forecasting systems and plan for evacuation or other measures to be taken during a disaster alert period to minimize potential loss of life and physical damage. It also involves the education and training of officials and the population at risk, the training of intervention teams, and establishment of policies, standards, organizational arrangements, and operational plans to be applied following a disaster. Effective plans also considered securing resources, possibly including stockpiling supplies and earmarking funds. These plans must be supported by enabling legislation. Disaster Preparedness Framework. Disaster preparedness minimizes an adverse effect of a hazard. It includes effective precautionary actions, rehabilitation and recovery to ensure the timely, appropriate and effective organization and delivery of relief and assistance following disasters. While planning of preparedness, accessing the vulnerability as accurate as possible and as a means to inform decision makers about the utility of national and local level of approaches. Secondly, until the dimensional of the disaster's threat and levels of preparedness are fully appreciated, they may not be effective starting points upon which to construct an overall plan. Thirdly, vulnerability assessments should serve as the basis for more continuous habit of monitoring trends in physical, socio-economic and infrastructure condition of disaster-prone countries. Planning is theme of the whole disaster preparedness exercise. It carries 4 distinct points as follows. Have clarity in the objective. Systematic sequence activity in logical and clear manner. Assigns specific tasks and responsibility. Integrates its activities, tasks and responsibilities. Structure of disaster plan. The typical structure of a disaster plan includes the physiographic conditions of a country, the threat, the command and coordination, planning groups, external assistance, emergency operations, countermeasures, administrative facilities, financing, supply of resources and communication. Planning might best be seen as the coordination of the intentions and plans of each collaborating party. Planning is not simply the work of experts. Rather, it includes such aspects as challenging shoe factory managers to decide how to protect and respond to threats to their employees and facilities, or asking farmers how they intend to protect their seedlings or animals. By adopting the above actions, one should decide who is qualified to get involved in the process of planning. Preparing the people. After the disaster, who comes first? It's the local people, not just individual. Community copes with disaster. Those with resources share in the social responsibility towards vulnerable. Prevention or minimization of earthquake losses largely depends on active cooperation from a learned and informed citizenry and community. Very few people in this region have had the experience of witnessing the instant disaster wrought by a major earthquake, and any thought of disaster from that source do not occur to most people. Hence, there is an urgent necessity of educating the public about the possibility of damaging earthquakes in this region and the measures that may minimize the damage. This awareness development can be done through school education, seminar, symposium, radio, television, etc. Vigorous campaign for earthquake insurance, particularly for engineered structures, should be launched. Levels of poverty and conflicts are high across the region. Protection measures involve additional investment, and people are generally reluctant to make this extra investment even though it may be very small, as earthquakes are infrequent occurrences and public memory is short. However, if it could be brought home to them that the little extra expenditure could mean escape from disaster in case of an earthquake, the code will have wider acceptance. When one looks on the impact of these disasters, it is found to be contrasting to each other. Traditionally, the Government of India is aware of the recurring occurrence floods. The management of flood situation in Uttarakhand has been highly criticized by many stalwarts. In toto, the government has to take lesson from the lamenting notes of the public and seriously plan for a future course of action, and that should be the foremost role of the government. It is worth to note the Government of India has sprung into action during the Katharina storm surge. The recording of tsunami has provided necessary motivation to the public as well as the government. In the past, disaster management in India was kept as an issue of extending relief and rehabilitation assistance. As a challenge to all disasters, India has come out with a new policy and program initiatives for mitigating the natural and man-made disasters. India is one of the most vulnerable developing countries to suffer very often from various natural disasters like drought, flood, cyclone, hailstorm, locust, volcanic eruption, etc., which strike regularly, causing a devastating impact on human life, economy, and environment. Though it is almost impossible to fully recoup from the damage caused by the disasters, it is possible to minimize the potential risks by developing early warning strategies, prepare and implement developmental plans to provide resilience to such disasters, mobilize resources including communication and telemedicinal services. Disaster Management Act of India. In 2005, Government of India has declared the establishment of authority in the name of National Disaster Management Authority under the chairmanship of Prime Minister of India, who can nominate 9 persons, one as vice chairperson. The appointment of officers and other staff from time to time will be provided by the central government. The authority is vested with the power of laying down the policy, plans and guidelines, approval of national plan and coordinate the enforcement and implementation of the policies, recommend funds for the purpose of mitigation, providing such support to the countries met with major disaster, take suitable measures for the prevention, mitigation, preparedness and capacity building, lay down the policies and guidelines for the functioning of NIDM. The authority may constitute advisory committee consisting of experts of the respective disaster. The authority will assist to the central government to form National Executive Committee. The Secretary to the Government of India looking after the disaster management. The Secretaries to Government of India for Agriculture, Finance, Health, Communication, Water Resources, Staff. The chairperson of the committee can access the power to constitute subcommittees, keeping one member of the national executive. Chairperson shall assist the national authority discharging of the duties, monitoring the body, preparing the national plan, coordinate the implementation of the national policies. Statement of the problem. Disaster management is an umbrella term covering the management of a variety of disasters like earthquakes, floods, and cyclones. In the India context, the government agencies who emerged as the key players in disaster management enlisted cyclones, floods, hailstorms, avalanches, landslides, earthquakes, drought, and pest disasters to facilitate delivery of a set of service for rescue, relief, and rehabilitation. The Union government, in association with the states, initiated schemes right from the 50s and allocated funds to address the problems of drought and flood-prone areas. Effective management and efficient delivery of a set of services by various agencies involved during disasters, therefore, assumes greater significance. Disaster management could be defined as an effective and efficient delivery of a set of mitigation services to the affected people of a region by a set of agencies to the encounter situation arising out of natural hazards, given the physical, financial, and other exogenous constraints. The agencies involved should also act as facilitators to maximize the effectiveness of the individual and the community in survival techniques and mitigation measures. Post-cyclone measure. The Government of India deemed it a calamity of rare severity. Army help was extended to remove debris. The India Railways offered to transport relief material free of charge to Orissa. A unified multidisciplinary control room was established in Krishi Bhavan, New Delhi, for dispatch of essential commodities. The control room decided the route and mode of dispatch of identified essential commodities. An interministerial coordination group, IMGG, was set up in October under the chairmanship of the Secretary DAC to monitor the rescue and relief operation. The Prime Minister of India, Sri Atal Bihari Vajpayee, visited Orissa state on 5th November and announced immediate release of 100 crore rupees from the National Fund for Calamity Relief, NFCR. A high-powered task force, HPTE, was constituted under the chairmanship of the Minister of Defense, George Fernandez. The armed forces deployed aircraft, helicopters, boats and other heavy equipment to rescue the stranded and marooned people. Central Industrial Security Force, CISF, Rapid Action Force, RAF, and Central Reserve Police Protection Force, CRPF, put together deployed 21 companies. Education in disaster management. Having met with large number of disasters with heavy loss and spent nearly 70 years after independence, India has yet to realize the importance of bringing the mass to awareness. Even countries like Singapore, Thailand, Korea, Panama, Uganda have already initiated the teaching of disaster management. India is still in the lethargic conditions, blinking what to do. At this juncture, we should appreciate the efforts of few individuals, NGOs, and institutions who have given voice enough to the public on the necessity of learning disasters. There are three vital sections to be understood in applying the managerial activity. It is nothing but mitigation, monitoring, and awareness. Depending upon the convenience and local demand, few institutions have started the disaster management learning, but only as part-time correspondence course, that too in the level of PG diploma, and certificate. There are a number of universities and institutes offering certificate, postgraduate diploma, master's and research degree. Any course in disaster management is suitable to all subject students, but for sociology, social work, economics, public administration, psychology, geography, geology, meteorology, and agricultural students, it is most suitable. Role of disaster management personnel. Trained manpower is necessary to deal with the situation before, during, and after the disasters. The trained manpower helps in quick rehabilitation of the disaster-affected people, understands their psychological conditions, and helps in their post-disaster settlement. In the planning and policy making, trained and experienced personnel are highly required to give better suggestions. In the country, Ministry of Home Affairs is the nodal agency which monitors and manages the disasters. Other ministries and departments like agriculture, chemical, civil aviation, railways, road transport, environment and forest, health and atomic energy are responsible for their respective areas. Job opportunities. There are good employment opportunities in disaster management in government as well as in private organizations. The work profile varies like teaching, research and consultancy, documentation, training organizer, field training and mock driller expert. Thus, in disaster management, there are good job opportunities. A quote by Anonymous: "All the flowers of the tomorrows are in the seeds of today and yesterday, but for the society and nations too." In the context of disaster management, it should be learning lessons for all when the world is becoming increasingly vulnerable to disasters, and especially for us, the country like India, where disasters are now one of the regular features. Nearly 3 million people worldwide have been killed from past natural disasters. The socio-economic backwardness of the majority of our population, coupled with lack of skills for mitigating and responding to disasters management earlier, perceived to be the primary responsibility of the government, has been diversified with the non-governmental organizations, community-based organizations, educational institutions, media, and community. Prevention is better than cure is an old saying which is very apt in the context of disaster management. Measures, facts, to improve disaster management in India. At the central or national level, Ministry of Home Affairs is entrusted with the nodal responsibility of managing disaster. Formation of National Crisis Management Committee as the next important functionary to give direction to Crisis Management Group. State and district level. At the state level, there are state commissioners who are in charge of the relief measures in wake of natural disaster in the respective states. At the tehsil level, DSO, SDM take care of disaster management under the direction of district collectors. Learning from the Latur earthquake calamity. The Multi-Hazards Disaster Mitigation Plan will create a disaster management information at Emergency Operations Center at state government headquarters. Some state governments have got their acts together, learning from past experiences. Andhra Pradesh government successfully programmed to evacuate 6 lakh people 52 hours before cyclone. The IMD has set up a national seismic telemetry network to anticipate threats from seismics. The IMD has established Cyclone Warning Center and the data is supplied to the Ministry of Agriculture. ISRO has put up 250 strong warning receivers. By constructing embankment, 15 million hectares are recovered for irrigation. ENDP, USAID and European Commission started multi-hazard management program. A comprehensive program has been taken for earthquake risk mitigation. Training of health managers and medical personnel began under hospital preparedness. Urban earthquake vulnerability reduction program in 38 cities in the seismic zones have been trained. Disaster risk management program in 160 districts has been initiated. Training of skilled personnel, village panchayat, etc. on 17 states started. A novel method of receiving the message of disaster risk reduction implemented. Disaster risk management program in 160 districts has been initiated. Training of skilled personnel, village panchayat, etc. on 17 states started. A novel method of receiving the message of disaster risk reduction implemented. Disaster management as a subject on social science on schools have been introduced. Capacity building, awareness and sharing of best practices in disaster management, the Home Ministry developed resource material. Conclusion. There should be a proper multi-tier organizational structure in a focused and coordinated manner, responsible for the overall management at national, state, district and village levels. The basic design of disaster management should consist of planner coordinated efforts in the following areas: identification and predication, early warning system, evacuation, relief, rescue, rehabilitation, compensation, reconstruction and preparedness. There is a need to share the expertise and experiences, as then states can learn from each other. There is also a need for training personnel likely to face natural disaster and those who deal with relief operations. In India, it is reported that the lack of coordination among the different service agencies during mitigation, there is no proper curriculum in the field.